do. But it's no secret that the majority of the news outlets are dominated by the far left views of liberalism. Every now and then I will watch a news segment from that side. Uh, my wife will often ask, why would anyone believe that? And I share that sentiment, right? Some of the things they come up with. Who in their right mind would believe such a thing? Well, they're not in their right mind. There you go. But the answer is simple. They watch it all the time. So after hearing it for so long and so often, they begin to believe the absurdity as truth. No matter how absurd it is, or how absurd it would have seemed to people 10 years ago, because it's continually being put out there incrementally, without stop, without watching it over and over and over and over. And it's not, just so you know, when I say, news media, I guess I shouldn't limit it to news media. It's just the easiest part to talk about. But even media in general, I mean, the movies, TV shows, commercials, everywhere you look, leftist liberalism is being pushed. So these absurd things that are completely absurd are believable if you watch it long enough and often enough. And since it is dominated across the spectrum, then you could expect that the majority of people will begin to believe these things. Even if they did not previously believe these things, because it's dominating most of everything that people are seeing, it's just a matter of time before most people do believe these things, that the majority will be leftist, liberal, whatever have you. I'm trying to keep it as broad as possible. I'm trying not to get too specific here, but I think you get the idea. And even the few that, the conservative outlets out there, they too are portraying some things that are also not righteous. They're also not, that are also absurd, equally absurd. And, often the line between what they call leftist liberal view and to help the liberal side win over the holdouts. The people that are still holding out and not joining up with their absurdity. It almost seems like the conservative side is just helping the liberal side a little bit to help push some people over. And that just seems to be what's going on. But no matter what side is portrayed, neither side is righteous. Okay? And they both have their version of the truth. They have their version of the truth. And there's a saying that if you hang out in a barber shop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. Right? And basically what that means is, not the knowledge of God, I speak this to your shame. Okay? Now that word there, translated as manners or good manners, could also mean good morals or good moral habits. So if you are discipled, if you are a disciple of Christ and you have disciplines in your life, holy disciplines, good moral disciplines in your life, evil communications will destroy all of that. And don't be deceived. Do not deceive yourself into thinking that you can continue with evil communications. And communications, it could be company or interaction. It could mean interaction with people. These evil interactions, right? And think that you're just immune and it's not going to change your discipline as a Christian. If you continue to do it often enough, it says it will. It says, be not deceived. This evil communications, it does corrupt good manners or good moral habits. It will corrupt it. Don't be deceived by that. Okay? So if you allow yourself to be influenced often enough, long enough, it will begin to influence you. Right? It will begin to influence you. It will begin to change you. The Bible tells us this. But instead of doing that, the Bible tells us to awake to righteousness and sin not. Right? And for some have not the knowledge of God, I speak to this to your shame. So this is exactly what we're talking about today. And even though these groups out there, they try to portray themselves, especially the conservative side, and the reason why I say that they seem to be there mainly to help get the holdouts from being, where they are, maybe even grounded in the truth, maybe real Christians, and try to get them a little bit closer to the liberal side. I mean, just in my short life, I've noticed that what people call conservative today is not what they called conservative 20 or 30 years ago, right? You should have seen some of the conservatives back then, 20 or 30 years ago, right? So the conservative side has actually become more liberal even in that short span. And I think the reason why is because a lot can be done with television. And like I said, television is dominated by leftist liberal values and views and their version of the truth. And it's only a matter of time before that keeps getting portrayed that the conservative side starts to slowly drift over to the liberal side. And I would even dare to say that what passes as a staunch conservative today would have been considered a moderate maybe 20 or 30 years ago. That's someone who's on the fence. They don't even know if they're liberal or if they're conservative. They're just on the fence. That's how they would have been conceived and perceived back then, right? So there's been a lot of shifting already. But you still are expected just this one or just that one, right? That's what you're expected to accept. And it's only a matter of time before you buy into that narrative that you say, well, I'm just going to take the conservative side, and then I'm going to anchor myself right here, and I'm just going to follow them no matter what. And the next thing you know, you find yourself agreeing to things that you should have not agreed to. All right? Because one thing you have to realize is they're not all Christians, are they? Or are any of them Christian? That's probably a better question, right? Are any of them Christian, right? And there's sometimes that they say things that seem to agree with real Christian values, right? But then, if you're watchful, if you're guarding yourself, you'll also notice things that do not align with Christian values at all. And what are you going to do? Are you going to point that out and mark that in your mind and your memory? Say, hey, I have to be careful. I can't trust this person. Or are you just going to say, well, they say a lot of good things too, and, just kind of glaze over it and brush over it, and it's just no big deal. Now, once you start doing that, you're well on your way to being pulled over to their side, just so you know. But I say that both narratives are false, right? Any narrative that places their foundation for truth outside of having a foundation in God is a false narrative. Doesn't matter what they call themselves, whether they call themselves conservative or ultra-conservative or whatever they want to call themselves, it is not the correct foundation. And I've actually I've heard this said. I didn't say this myself. I got this from someone else. And they said that conservatism is nothing more than imitation salt. It's imitation salt. It's not the real deal. It might seem like the real deal. It kind of portrays itself like it is the real deal, but it's only a cheap imitation, right? So it's good to keep things like that in mind. And as Christians, we know that we must not place our foundation for truth in man, but our foundation for truth must be found in God. Matthew 7. verses 24 through 27. Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine, this is Jesus speaking, by the way, the words in red, right? And doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man, which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And every one that heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them not, shall be likened unto a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. So it's easy to see that the rock is Jesus Christ, because he's talking about what he is saying, that if you do not hear and obey the words that Jesus spoke, then your foundation is on the sand, right? And Jesus, and only through Jesus, can we be consecrated and cleansed before God. And what Moses did was only a foreshadow of what Jesus did, right? So yeah, Jesus was like unto Moses. Let's go back to Deuteronomy 18:16. According to all that thou desirest, God's actual name, but the actual Hebrew is, says, according to all that thou desirest. Jesus answered and said unto him, and make our abode with him. He that loveth me not, keepeth not my sayings, and the word which ye hear is not mine, but the Father's which sent me. You know, the word which ye hear is not mine, but the Father's which sent me. So again, Jesus is proclaiming to be the fulfillment of Deuteronomy 8. And I can't really automatically assume that all Christians understand these very basic things, because we'll get here in just a minute, that there's many Christians who don't even listen to or obey or hearken to the words of Jesus, but instead say, yeah, that's what he said, and then they kind of move on like it doesn't matter. Okay? And I find that that's more common than anything else. That's more common than you'd want to believe. It's even more common than they would want to believe. And I've called people out on it. But Jesus is the truth. So it's impossible. A lie. It's impossible because he is the truth. Right? And of course I'm referring to Numbers 23:19. Salvation is impossible. The warning here is to continue. Otherwise, you will be cut off. Otherwise, someone who is born again, had God living inside of them, had salvation in their future, and because they were high-minded and they did not fear, they boast against the Jews, and they're cut off. So how much more is it required for the Christian to listen and heed to the words of Jesus Christ and obey? And Jesus healed him, right? And he didn't know who Jesus was. All he knew is this man came along and healed him, right? It says, afterward Jesus findeth him in the temple and said unto him, behold, thou art made whole. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee. Wow. He just told that man to stop sinning. Okay, let's go to John 8:11. And you guessed it, it's the exact same thing, except a different person. This is the one caught in the very act, according to the Pharisees, but of course they didn't bring the other half of that adultery. They just brought her alone, trying to trap Jesus. They also didn't bring the man who was committing adultery with this woman. They didn't bring him also, as the law demanded. At that time, the old covenant law demanded that both of them be stoned to death, not just one of them. And I believe that's how they were planning on trapping Jesus. But Jesus, if you read this, you know exactly how he was not trapped. But all that aside, this is a different person. And it says, she said, "No, neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more." Who had a palsy 38 years to sin no more, and told this woman that was caught in the act of adultery, after he forgave her, to sin no more. Stop sinning, doesn't it? Oh, no. Well, it's true, Jesus said that, but blah, 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 blah. And they're off to the races. Not taking heed to what Jesus said. Is Jesus capable of making himself understood? Since God is holding us accountable to what he said. So Jesus is perfectly able. It's just that simple. Not now you say, well, I thought that was true. But you're right, Jesus did say that, so therefore we must believe it. Well, take your house and build it upon the rock. You don't have to stay on the sand. You can build your house on the rock. Right? And that's what I hope that you would do. That's what I did. There's plenty of times in my life where my house was on the sand. I thought I was on the rock. I sung hymns. And I sung hymns with all of my heart and all of my emotion, with all of my love toward God. Worship. I'm on the solid rock of Jesus Christ. Then I read the Bible, sin no more. Whoa. Wow. That means we stop sinning? Yes, because Jesus is the truth. He can't lie. And Jesus is God. He knows what we're capable of doing and what we're not capable of doing. All of creation was created through Jesus Christ. We see it means you can do it. And if you look at the other parts of the New Testament and look at that, it becomes clear once you realize that. At least it became clear to me. I was like, well, this has to be somewhere else. I look all through the New Testament, and there it is, all through the New Testament. That not only can we do it, but we're required to. And that's the proof that we're on solid rock. That's the proof that we're on the solid foundation. We start with Jesus, and we go throughout all of Scripture. But if you deny him before men, if you give the words of men preference over the words of Jesus, that Jesus can only be understood through the wranglings and craftiness of men, then you've denied Jesus. You've denied him already, and you need to repent. So back to my original point. If you seek the news media as your source of truth, get too immersed in politics, you will eventually be corrupted. Enslaved to whatever narrative of the leftist liberals? Certainly not. Oh, but and ultra-conservatives? Certainly not. I don't believe the narrative that they're pushing. I don't believe that what Trump says he is really aiming for is really what he's aiming for. I believe that the actual truth will say something different if we were able to know it. Because my foundation for truth isn't in the conservative. Guard your heart with all diligence. Then what comes out of your heart is going to be evil instead of good. It's going to be unrighteous instead of righteous. Because it says, out of the heart come all the issues of life. So that's why you need to guard your heart. If you do vigilantly and continually, your heart's going to be corrupted. And then what comes forth after that is going to be bad fruit. And not only will you not be fooled by them, but you're not going to be fooled by the so-called Christian church who have all these traditions and doctrines of mysteries, and you're not going to let them fool you. If the truth is your foundation. So you need to love the truth. You need to love Jesus Christ. And how do we love Jesus Christ? We see what the Bible says. We see how it says and how it pertains to us. And we believe it and we do it without reservation. Without excuse. Just do it. Stop making excuses. It's like, wow, these things seem impossible to me. Well, they are. We need Jesus. It's through His strength that we're able to do all of this. On our own, we've already proved that we can't do it on our own. We've all sinned. And if you think on the sand, so it's because Jesus is in our life, because He is giving us His strength, because we are relying, and He is giving us the peace that passes all understanding. And we do have this relationship that it's that makes it possible for us to accomplish these things. Not just to say that, well, one day that, we'll just become these things. When we get our glorified bodies, surely we'll go from being a wretched sinner to a saved saint at that time. But no, that's not what's going to happen. Filthy, you're going to be filthy still. If you die in righteousness, you need to be righteous before you die. That's only possible through Jesus Christ. And we must love the truth. And we know that we're in the last days. We've been in the last days ever since Jesus Christ was crucified and then rose upon high onto the throne of God, where He sits today. Since then. But if the person of Antichrist rises up to power in our lifetime, still here and alive on the earth, we make sure that we have a solid and that we love the truth. That we love Jesus. If we don't love Jesus, we don't love the truth. Well, in those days specifically, there is a warning. 2 Thessalonians. Chapter 2, verses 7 through 12. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work, was already at work whenever this was penned on paper or parchment or whatever it was. So the mystery of iniquity was already at work. So because I've seen people who claim to be Christians who are really immersed in politics, and there's all kinds of compromises in their life. And you start wondering, how can you call yourself a Christian with this going on in your life? Oh, don't be a legalist, Pharisee. When actually they are the Pharisee, because the Pharisees, the reason why what they did was wrong is because they were hypocrites, claiming to be of God, but theologies, and pushing their